What's going on? What's going on, everybody? Hopefully, everybody had a great weekend, and everybody's Monday and return to work has been good. We had a little bit of a mishaps as far as the internet stuff like that, but we've gotten that straightened out. And the kids have just gotten home, just got done doing their homework, and now they're enjoying being able to be on their, tablets and stuff like that. So today's topic is going to be purity culture versus the Christian sexual ethic, guess culture or whatever they're kind of wanting to call it. Um, and this was brought to my attention by one of my Facebook friends. I don't want to say any names because I've kind of gotten back a little bit of feedback that might not be a good thing. So I'm just going to try to keep everything pretty anonymous, and then if anybody wants to uh, share their thoughts, to feel free to do so. So anyway, I saw this post here by one of my friends on Facebook, which brought up which kind of goes into the idea of purity culture versus Christian sexual ethic. And with that friend and with some of my other friends, um, I was kind of just challenging the notion of this. Initially, my challenge came on the basis that, and I still believe this, is that this is a response to um, the dwindling number of supporters inside the church, the dwindling church numbers. It is what it is. So, and when I initially said this, I was just saying that if you start um, bending Christian values to modern cultural values, then you start to kind of bend um, the morals and the morality of what Christianity is and everything like that. Because it's my understanding that Christianity and religions, period, but we're talking about Christianity today, so let's stick to that. Christianity is supposed to be a fixed moral guide on how you live your life. Does that make any sense? And so when it says to do something, follow these commandments and stuff like that, you're supposed to do that because again, that's your moral. That's where you go to get your morality. It's a fixed place. Um, and often it is uh versus or against something like what we would call, common culture morality. So, and when I say common culture morality, what I mean by that is morality in just the common world changes based on where you're at, the people in charge, um, the time that you're in. And when I mean that time, I'm talking like, 15 years ago, it might have been okay to say this, but now it's not okay to say this. Those type of things. And when you get into that type of thinking, um, I always say that if you start to get into that type of thinking and you don't have, you get into the whole morality is just based on what is currently culturally acceptable, then ultimately morality is very malleable and it can change. And then there is no such thing as a concrete morality. There is no such thing as a concrete good or bad thing. Good or bad just depends on where you're at, the place, and the time. So, for instance, let's see. I'll just use the Middle East as an example here. In the Middle East, the way that they treat, the way that they view um, certain, the way that they view certain things and how they treat certain situations, it's going to depend from here in the U.S. So, okay, let me get something. Let me give a real more definitive example. And again, this isn't saying that I believe or not believe. This is just kind of to give you an example of morality. So, here in the U.S., the legal age to have sex is 18. That's U.S. wide. I don't know what very state to state, but as far as nationwide acceptability, 18 is the age in which a person is deemed able to have sex. In parts of the Middle East, that age is lowered down to 12 or 13 and stuff like that. Now, if you're from the U.S., you're going to say that's absolutely crazy. That's pedophile, that's everything, and all of that nature. And that's because of the morals and stuff that you were brought up under. Versus if you're from the Middle East and stuff like that, you might just say, well, hey, this is the way that we do things here. This is the way that we're brought up. These, um, by the age of, 12, 13, 14, a lot of people are, coming up on their sexual maturity as far as the biological clock and stuff like that. Again, this isn't me condoning anything. This is just me simply giving an example of what happens when you start to bend morality to fit a certain culture or to fit a certain set of people in a certain set of time period and stuff like that. Now, I do understand that there are uh, certain things that um, can be universally agreed upon as far as morality. So I would say that it's pretty much universally agreed upon that um, killing killing your mother or your father isn't a good thing. However, there are always circumstances and everything like that that will say that okay, uh, maybe your mom was about to go shoot up a bunch of schools or something like that, and so you were the only one that's able to stop her, and now you had to kill her off and stuff like that. And again, but still, again, though, that it's all a kind of a again, it just depends on where you're at, time, place, and everything like that. That's the world morality view and everything like that. I mean, I'm not trying to get into that because that's not really what the focus of this video is supposed to be. Again, that was just an example. So when it comes to Christianity, Christianity gives you a outlines a set of rules or a set of standards that you base yourself around. Again, that's your moral compass is outlined, within the Bible and within Christianity and everything like that. So that brings me back to the purity culture versus the sexual ethics. So I'm going to just, I mean, you guys can read this. Hopefully, you guys read this for yourself, but I'm just going to read this for just kind of clarity's sake. So it says purity culture in modern corners has co-opted a positive Christian. Um, let me restart this. Purity culture in modern corners has co-opted a positive Christian sexual ethic. However, as people have come to realize the dangers and dark sides of purity culture, Christian sexual ethics are often tossed aside as they are one and the same. Here are some differences. And so it then goes into the differences between purity culture versus the Christian sexual ethic culture or whatever. And again, these are just simply structures, and this really is more for like parents and teachers and stuff like that and what they're going to instill in their offspring and everything like that. But they're just kind of two guidelines on what you want to go on. So in purity culture, it says, all kissing or touching is reserved for marriage, while in the Christian sexual ethic, it says sexual intercourse and deep petting is ideally reserved for marriage. It's um, and then there are other ones, and if you guys want to read through all of that, you can pause the video and read through all of those. I'm not going to read through all of those because I don't want to make the video excessively long for no reason. So I'm going to kind of just stop at that first one because really that's kind of where our conversation got started. It's because I said that to me, there's really not much wrong with purity culture, and that if you start the idea, excuse me, sorry, um, if you start the idea that sexual intercourse is ideally reserved for marriage, then that leaves an open interpretation that sexual intercourse doesn't have to be reserved for marriage. And for me, um, and this is a person that, again, I'm a person that 10, 15 years ago, I would have been all for everything on the right side of this. I would have been all for Christian sexual ethic, but I would 100% agree that sexual intercourse, especially for a woman, and I'm going to get into this later on. I know it's not going to seem fair, but it is what it is. Sexual intercourse needs to be reserved for marriage. I wouldn't say ideally. I want to say sexual intercourse needs to be reserved for marriage. And we got into a little bit of a debate or conversation, whatever you guys want to call it, regarding this because one of my other friends was like, well, um, one of my other friends and then her friend kind of chimed in and was saying that, well, in the purity culture, they don't teach us about sex. They don't um, teach us about our bodies. They don't teach us none of that. They just say basically everything involving sex is a sin. So masturbation is considered a sin, sexual arousal and lust and everything like that are considered sins and everything like that. And basically, the Christian sexual ethics kind of addresses some of those, addresses those issues and creates more of a leniency for that. And like I said, and kind of like I've said before, is I think that the purity culture side of this, when it's done correctly, will result in um, better outcomes as far as relationships and families are concerned. Because, like I said, another one in this that I really pushed back upon is going to be, marriage is a predefined goal, especially for women. And then another thing, it says marriage and singlehood are both valid life options. Again, the reason I pushed back on that is because when you say marriage and singlehood are both valid life options, you're saying that it's now um, not required to get married before sex. You're now saying that it's okay to have sex and be single, and both of those are viable in the eyes of God and in the eyes of the Lord. And again, I pushed back on that because now you're changing a lot of what you're changing some of the morals that have been held in place within Christianity. It's either marriage is the one or singlehood, and going about it. Either one of them is the correct way of doing things. Does that make sense? Hopefully, that makes sense. One of these options is the correct thing of doing things in the eyes uh, of the Lord. And from my understanding, and honestly, just through experiences of life, marriage is that option. That was the first thing that God did was um, marry Adam and Eve so they could be fruitful and multiply. Which let me get into that as well. God, God has never, from my understanding, has never really said that sex is bad or sex is a sinful thing or anything like that. From my understanding, he makes it pretty clear that sex in certain situations is a bad thing. And when it comes to the whole singlehood thing, it can be a bad thing, especially for women. And this is just because the outcome of sex for a woman versus the outcome of sex for a man hold different weight. This is just this is just the truth. A woman being very promiscuous, to say the least, is going to yield a different outcome if or when she decides to want to get married slash settle down and have a family than it is going to yield for a man generally. again, this is just generalizations. Again, we all know we have our own situations and everything like that, but I'm just speaking in a general sense here. The again, what a lot of the women and everything like that, and a lot of the modern culture that's taught us is that you know women can just be sexually promiscuous, just sexually outgoing and everything like that. As a guy, which is true, women are able to do whatever they want to do in this modern culture, and I don't take anybody's choice away. If you're a woman that wants to go out and be promiscuous and everything like that, great. That's your right. But you have to understand that your outcomes for doing those things aren't to be equal to a man's, because that's just simply not how it works. That's just simply not how it works. Okay? If you are a woman and you go out and you sleep around, and then let's say, for instance, you end up pregnant by a guy who maybe wasn't ready to be a father, or just simply not prepared or in a financial state to be a father, and he simply walks away. He uses that same freedom of choice, just like you have, to walk away. You're now left with the choice of either you're going to have the baby yourself and raise the baby yourself, making you a single parent, or you go with the other choice, which is terminating the pregnancy through abortion. Both of those are very difficult choices. Both of those are very difficult choices, but those are all choices that were made because of a decision that you made. And this is why the purity culture just says, you know what? It's best for you just not to have sex. Again, especially as a woman, it's best for you just not to have sex to even allow yourself to be put in that situation. And I know a lot of people are going. I'm not gonna say a lot of people, but I know some people are going to say, okay, well, what about the guys and everything like that? Fine, I'm going to get into that, but let's talk about the women for more again. Also, when you're being sexually promiscuous as a woman, you're inviting, um, you're setting a bar for your ultimate prize, or the ultimate prize that a lot of guys want, which is just sexual energy. Okay? Again, this is just generally speaking. I'm not talking about Christians. I'm not talking about your dad or your mom or anything like that. I'm just speaking in generalization. Generally, what a guy wants out of a woman when it comes to a relationship is sex. This is, I mean, this used to just be kind of an understood thing, but now people just want to act like that's not true, but this is still true. Generally speaking, a guy's main thing that he wants out of you is sex. And a woman's main thing that she wants out of that um, deal, quote unquote, to say that deal, is a relationship and a family and security and everything like that. But sex to if you've given sex to 5 or 10 people, and then you run into a guy and you tell that guy, or he finds out that you've given sex to these 5 or 10 people over here, he's already created a standard for you in his mind. Why should he pay more, aka get into a relationship, get into a marriage that, again, marriage doesn't really, especially in today's society, doesn't really benefit the man as much as it does the woman. Why would he get into a marriage with you when he know he can get sex out of you without having to have that commitment? And the more times you do that, the more you're lowering your uh, what they would call sexual marketplace value. But the more times you were uh, setting that as to be the bar for yourself. Does that make sense? Versus the woman who has said, okay, I'm going to stick to my morals. I'm going to stick to where I'm at. I'm absolutely not going to be having any type of intercourse or anything with you until we are married. She set that bar there. And guys will look at that. that girl that's a virgin, that girl that is young, beautiful, and everything like that, they're gonna look at her higher. She's gonna be more of marriage material for when that guy is ready to get married. Does that make sense? Also touching on the whole, what if you have a child? So let's say you don't abort the child. Let's say you actually say, I want to be a single parent. I want to raise this kid to the best of my ability and everything like that. Awesome. Great. That is a great thing. I mean, first of all, I don't advocate for single parenthood at all because too many statistics have shown that having a mother and a father in the household results in a way better upbringing for a child. But let's say that you didn't have that option. Let's say the father walked away or just wasn't ready or whatever, and you decide to be a single parent. Most single parents are women. Let's just get that out the way. That you do have single fathers, obviously. You do have single fathers, but in generally speaking, most single parents are women. And if this kind of ties into what I was saying before, if you've not only given sex to a man, but then you've had his children, which is like the ultimate thing that a woman can give to a man, is offspring. You've set a hard bar for yourself. This isn't to say that a man won't ever pick you. What it's just saying is that you're you're in almost that mode of to where you can't really be choosy because you've already said that A, you're willing to have sex unmarried, and B, you're willing to have a child unmarried. So why should that next person wait for you to do all of these things when you didn't do it for that first person? Does that make any sense? Hopefully, I'm making sense with you guys. And again, I know for for some people, this is going to be hard to hear, but this is just the facts and biology. This is just how stuff works. This is just how some people call it the game. This is just how the game is. I'm not saying that it's fair. I'm just telling you how it is. So when you're talking about purity culture versus that sexual Christian ethics, which again, one of them is basically saying these are absolutes, versus the others are saying that pretty much everything is situational, everything is malleable, but nothing has to necessarily be concrete or absolute. I will always pick that absolute version, that purity culture. I'm not saying everything within inside of the purity culture is perfect. I don't think that sexual information should be withheld. I believe on both of these, it should say sexual information should be available freely. And it should be available freely. So, but not only should sexual information be available freely, the consequences of sex should be available freely. You should be able to talk to single parents, married couples, um, old and young, so you really get an idea of what you're going to be getting yourself into. So that's why I said when it comes to the whole purity culture thing, a lot of what I'm hearing as far as the downsides to purity culture, it's usually not necessarily that purity culture is bad. It's just that the people who were teaching purity culture and the people who were instilling that idea just didn't instill it correctly. Just didn't instill the stuff correctly. But I can tell you, like I said, a product of a uh, I'm a product of a. I wouldn't say I'm a product of purity culture at all. I'm more of a product of the Christian sexual ethic things where everything is just kind of up in the air and everything like that. And I could tell you it's a lifestyle that if I could go back and do some flash stuff and reverse time and go back and speak to myself, I would say, you know what, Kenny, sit down and take this purity culture in because it's it leads to a more healthy relationship and familyship and everything like that. And this is especially true if you're trying to, if what you are ultimately trying to do out of life is create a family, is create your offspring and make them better and everything like that, then that purity culture is going to be the main thing for you. That's going to be the stuff that you're going to want to follow. And so just kind of get back, because I'm getting a little bit off, not off, but sidetracked a little bit. I want to go back to one of my friends who said that she was kind of against the idea of the purity culture. I just pushed back because she is a person that literally grew up in a purity culture in a household and has reaped the benefits of purity culture while speaking against it. And I just gave an example. Not only did the values that were instilled here help her to get married, help to create a strong foundation for herself, but at the same time, um, it's created her a way to be able to raise a family and have that great dynamic. And I would bet that if I was to go to her parents that were both there and everything like that, they probably had a similar raising. I don't think it's a coincidence that if you go back generations and generations, and the ones that really followed this purity culture stuff to a T, I don't think it's a coincidence that those generations didn't have a mass number of single households or children out of wedlock and stuff like that. I don't think that's a coincidence. I don't think it's a coincidence that not only did she, as the older sister, get married, but her younger sister got married at about the same age in the same fashion. And she had brought up the idea to where, because I had asked her to where, well, do you think if you actually went out and was sexually promiscuous and everything like that, that you would have found your husband? And pretty, she kind of vaguely said, well, yes. And my thing is that, okay, again, I can't speak for that person individually, but I can speak in a general sense that I can almost guarantee that her dad and her mom, but especially her dad, would look at her. Let me reverse this. I can almost guarantee that his dad, the husband's father and mother, would look at him marrying a girl that they know has been promiscuous out here in these streets, quote unquote, to say. They are going to look at her differently than if she were a confirmed version, a confirmed person that lives under these values that have been set up within purity culture. And the same is true. The reverse is true. If her parents was looking at him and saw that he was a lifelong bachelor, he was a player back in his day and everything like that, the dad is obviously is if the dad is actually in the life, which obviously he is in their life and stuff like that, he's gonna have a conversation with his daughter's potential husband. This is just custom. And he's going to be able to vet out, okay, is this a good dude or is this not a good dude? And if he's talking about, well, before I met your daughter a year ago, or before I met your daughter so and so ago, man, I had 20, 30 different women. And one of them got a kid. You think that the dad's not going to look at that person differently? Of course he is. I will say, though, that a guy being promiscuous and a girl being promiscuous, I've already said this before, but I'm saying it again, they have different outcome levels. So, yeah, while he might have had 30 kids and not 30 kids, but 30 different sexual partners and maybe one baby mama or something like that, just kind of how nature is and everything like that, his sexual market value isn't going to go down. His sexual market value is going to go down as far as the Christian eyes is concerned, especially if you're a part of that purity culture. but its overall sexual market value and holistically isn't going to go down because that's just how the world is. A guy with a whole bunch of girls and stuff around him. Okay, let me back up for a second and kind of re-explain this. A girl is born with inherent value. Okay, and when I say inherent value, I mean her sexuality and her beauty is her value. Let me give you an example. A beautiful girl that's a virgin could be working at McDonald's and pull a doctor. Does that make sense? Pull that lawyer, pull that doctor, pull that whatever. The reverse isn't generally true. And when I say pull, I'm talking about she could go on and marry this doctor, lawyer, or whatever, create a family, have kids, or whatever. The reverse usually is not true. You usually don't find um, super ripped dudes that are working at McDonald's with um, you usually don't. Those guys that are super ripped and working at McDonald's aren't going to be able to go out and potentially have sex with as many women as they want because they're going to be limited by their finances. Does that make any sense? Because again, if you just go back to the whole root of human nature and biology and why we really get into relationships and stuff like that. A woman tends to get into a relationship for security and for security reasons and protection reasons and everything like that, whereas a man is getting into a relationship for her sex, for her sexual energy. That's again, this is just typical. But that's why I said the guy though has to earn his way to do that. That guy has to not only stay in shape, but he has to put himself in a financial position to be able to do that. A guy making 100,000. Let me say this in this way: a guy making $100,000 is going to have more sexual opportunities than the guy making $15,000-$20,000 a year. Hopefully that we're understanding that, regardless of how those guys look. Regardless of how those guys look, if they're both ripped, they're both taking, doing what they need to do for their bodies and stuff like that. The guy that's making $100,000 is going to be over that guy that's ripped. As a matter of fact, the guy that's making $100,000 and might not even have the best body or anything like that is still going to have more of a sexual marketplace value in today's common world than the girl. I'm sorry, than the guy that's ripped and working at McDonald's. Are we understanding that? Let's take it to the real extremes then. Let's take it to the real extremes. Just to, again, kind of make the point more solidified. A homeless guy that's making no money, not doing nothing, but is absolutely beautiful, absolutely has chiseled chest and pecs and everything like that. Do you think his sexual market value is going to be as high as the guy making $100,000, regardless of how he looks? No. But the reverse is true for women. A woman who is, let's say, we just again, it's just an example. We know this woman is a virgin. She's 20, 21, 22. She's homeless. She's down and out. She ain't making no money. Her sexual options are still through the roof. Do you understand what I'm saying? Hopefully, you guys understand what I'm saying and what I'm getting at. So that's why there's a difference in how a guy versus a girl in this whole purity culture thing is kind of looked at differently. Again, girls just stand more to lose out of sex. It is what it is. It's not fair. Not saying it's fair, but it is what it is. It is what it is. It is what it is. So, so just to kind of wrap up this stuff, because I was not trying to make this too long of a video or anything like that. Just giving my uh, more of a clarification on where I'm at and where I stand with this stuff. I stand with the whole purity culture stuff. I stand that, and again, this is coming from a person that's engaged in the unchristian way, quote unquote, to say, and has reaped the consequences of doing such things. I 100% stand by the purity culture notion. You shouldn't, as a female, you shouldn't be having sex, especially if you're trying to have a family and everything like that and get the best guy that you can get. You shouldn't be having sex before marriage. That marriage comes before the sex. Okay? This is, to me, is an absolute. It's not a up in the air toss. Single motherhood, single parenthood is not a valid option for life. You should not choose to be a single parent because you are placing that child at high risk. You're placing that child at a higher risk versus another child that's within a two parent household. This is just, again, this is just proof. This is just not proof. This is just facts. Okay? Um, read through these one more again. Um, like I said, I don't agree with everything from the purity culture list. Again, I would say that the sexual information and the outcomes of sex should be freely available to the people in the purity culture. And I would also say that the whole masturbation is a sin and everything like that. That's a normal part of human development and everything like that. But I would also make sure that, again, you talk about the outcomes of masturbation. And that's usually one of the things that involves more men than it does women, just because, again, how we're wired. It is what it is. But just talk about the outcomes that can come from doing that type of stuff and engaging in that type of activity. Anyway, that was my 2 cents for everything. Hopefully, you guys have enjoyed the video. Um, Definitely want to thank you guys for coming and watching the video. Please rate, comment, subscribe, and let's just have a back and forth dialogue. Keep it friendly. And yeah, once again, thank you guys for coming and have a great and blessed rest of your day and